Hey everyone, it's Sevy. Welcome to my first follow-up video about Furina, where I'll go into a more detailed dive into her team comps. If you watch my main Furina guide, I mentioned that I wanted to make dedicated videos focused on her team considerations because with Furina being a Hydro unit, she has a lot of team reaction archetypes available to her. More importantly, her HP drain mechanic brings new implications for team synergies when it comes to healers, which does make things more interesting, but also brings in different sets of challenges to work with. This is also a unit that I think many people will pull for, whether now or in reruns, and for some players who aren't as experienced with team building yet, they might be looking for more guidance on how to better utilize Furina. In this video, I'm going to first discuss Freeze and Taser teams, flexible team archetypes that are relatively easy to build and satisfying to play. Then the succeeding videos are going to cover vaporized teams, Dendro-based teams, and other niches like mono elements and specific hyper carries. Although we'll be discussing a lot of character options and potential teams, I want to be clear that this isn't a video focused on calculated power comparison or tier lists. If you're interested in comparing strictly calculated damage output, there are Genshin simulators online that can help you do so, or just do your own personal tests to see how your own invested characters will compare to each other. Rather, you can consider these more as team building guides, especially for new players who have just started around this version and are still getting the hang of making synergistic team comps. We'll go through the foundations of Furina's teams, the reactions involved, tips on how to choose from your own character roster, plus particular synergies to take advantage of or challenges you may run into. At the end of the day, my goal is to help you discover more about Furina's team possibilities so that you can maximize her flexibility in different teams. Let's get started. I think the first consideration of Furina's teams is its healer. Understanding how they can synergize well with your team's reactions and damage dealers is essential in building an effective and comfortable Furina team. To recap on why healing is important, remember that Furina's pets will constantly drain your entire team's HP, and their damage gets stronger the more teammates you have that are above 50% HP, so healers will help you stay at high enough health. And Furina's fanfare stacks, which provide a team-wide damage bonus, are generated by either losing or increasing your party's HP, so healing your team also contributes to faster fanfare stack generation. The faster your HP changes, the faster you can ramp up Furina's damage bonus buff. If we round up our potential healer options, we have the following units in their elements, and we can generally first classify them as single target healers whose healing abilities will only affect the on-field character, or team-wide healers who can heal the entire party simultaneously while also having some form of on-field healing. As you can imagine, team-wide healers generally offer much more comfort and player friendliness in terms of managing your team's health, and their sudden bursts of healing are very good at accumulating a lot of fanfare stacks in an instant. However, single target healers that also have added useful utilities shouldn't be ignored, since depending on a team, they can still work well and contribute much more than just healing, albeit with a bit more effort in terms of team rotation management. With the importance of healing for Furina's teams, builds that have an emphasis on healing can have more value now, which I might mention every now and then in specific scenarios. Some catalyst units that aren't technically dedicated healers can also take on a pseudo-healer role thanks to the craftable prototype Amber, which heals your entire team after the user casts their burst. And while they're not necessarily going to be comfortable units to be your team's solo healers, they can at least work as secondary healers with little investment. And it's pretty amazing that Furina gives more value to unconventional considerations like these. Anyway, these healers will be mentioned all throughout the video in different team templates they're viable in, and if they have particular synergies or considerations in that particular team. Suffice to say, having competent healers will be very important to let Furina effectively work in various teams. Now let's move on to our first and fairly straightforward team template, Freeze. A huge advantage of freezing enemies is that they have less opportunities to attack you. This means that you can worry less about losing even more HP from enemy damage, and with Furina, you'll mainly have to contend with your own HP drain and the occasional enemy attacks that might get through. That will make you feel generally safer, and you will have more control over your team's HP loss and gain. The general template consists of Furina and another cryo unit, which creates the freeze core. Then we have two flex slots which are open to cryo, hydro, and animo units ranging from damage dealing and support roles. Depending if you have two hydro or cryo units, you'll also trigger hydro or cryo resonances. Hydro resonance helps boost your team's HP, which by default benefits Furina and any other HP scaling teammate, while cryo resonance boosts your team's crit rate versus cryo affected enemies, which mainly helps your damage output. Your hydro and cryo units will continuously deal damage and apply their elements to keep the enemies frozen for the most part or permanently. Having an animo unit is also great because they can use the Viridescent Venerer set to reduce the enemy's elemental resistance, and some animo units have abilities that can gain an elemental infusion to add more elemental application of that particular element. Anyway, let's cover our healer options. For Animo healers, Jean, Sayu, and a prototype Amber equipped Sucrose or Hazo are your main picks. Jean's burst can heal your team by a huge amount instantly, and she creates a field that can continuously heal the on-field unit. Her strong healing is quite reliable for keeping your team's HP at high levels. I think a lot of players are appreciating Jean more now, not just in Freeze, but in many other team comps, and rightfully so, since she's just a great healer and teammate for Furina overall. Sayu, in essence, functions very similarly to Jean, with the additional ability of being able to roll around and swirl elements, which provides extra full party healing over time that way. She's definitely still a capable Animo healer, despite being called a budget Jean. Sucrose or Hazo with a prototype Amber could also technically work, though you generally want to have another healer for better team sustain. Sucrose has stronger suction than Hazo for crowd controlling, but her EM sharing isn't that useful since EM doesn't really do much for Freeze teams. As for cryo healers, Charlotte is a very good option, as she marks enemies to apply cryo over time, resulting in good freeze uptime while providing strong team-wide and on-field healing from her burst, especially with her C1. Being a free support is one of Charlotte's best roles, and Furina pullers will most likely have a copy of her, plus some constellations. Mika also has a good team-wide healing burst, and when his Eagle Plume state is active, he buffs the active character's attack speed, and they can heal by using normal attacks. In particular, if you're using Risley as your cryo DPS, he can make very good use of Mika's attack speed buff to speed up his combos and get more hits in. However, many other Freeze teams, especially quick swap ones, don't really use normal attacks as much, if at all, which makes Mika's attack speed buff largely wasted in such cases. He also has very limited cryo application, so he won't contribute as much to keeping enemies frozen, and you'll need another good cryo applicator. Then there's Chi-Chi, who can give a lot of party-wide and on-field healing, plus periodic cryo application while her skill is active. With an Ocean-Hued Clam build, she can output some decent physical damage over time too. If you do use her in a Freeze team though, one main issue is that her skill lasts for 15 seconds but has a very long cooldown of 30 seconds, so her cryo application is somewhat limited. She also doesn't generate any cryo particles, so she can't battery her allies and herself. If you do have her C1 though, then that lets her have self-energy generation now, but she still won't generate cryo particles either way, which can affect your team's ER requirements. Diona is technically an option as well, but her healing is limited to a single target field and the ticks are quite slow at every 2 seconds for a total of 12 seconds. When using her, it becomes very circle impact heavy, and distributing her healing evenly is challenging given that you have only 6 on-field ticks, so it's a bit more challenging relying only on her for healing. I personally would recommend her the least as a dedicated healer, but if you can make it work, then that's perfectly fine of course. Then for Hydro healers, Kokomi is very comfy, heals a ton on-field and off-field, and has large AoE Hydro application. Barbara is also a decent option, though her Hydro application is more limited to her normal and charged attacks and staying close to enemies while her skill is active. Another pseudo healer option is Mona. She's mainly used for her Omen buff that increases the damage an enemy receives, and due to a special hidden mechanic, she can extend its duration in a Freeze team, so using the prototype Amber gives her additional support utility. If this is a quick swap team, then your party members will consist of units who have mainly off-field abilities. They swap in, unleash their skills and/or bursts, which will stay on the battlefield even if they're off-field. This allows you to rotate between your party members more freely and potentially funnel particles around for better energy gain. For instance, a sample budget quick swap comp would look like Furina, Kaya, Rosaria, and Sayu. All of them can just place their bursts on the field and can keep swapping in and out to generate particles and receive Sayu's single target heal. You can even let Sayu roll around a bit to swirl elements and proc her team healing. A more premium comp would be something like Furina, Ayaka, Shinha, and Jean, or Furina, Ganyu, Charlotte, and Venti. Having a grouper can be especially helpful so that you can more easily apply cryo and hydro on enemies while they're bunched up, and any abilities that deal damage in an AoE will more easily hit them. On the other hand, you might have a DPS that assumes a lot of on-field time, so their teammates will stay off-field for the most part to support them. Two notable and recent examples of on-field DPSs are Neuvillette and Risley, and for players who've started more recently and pulled for either of them and Furina, then fortunately they'll have good synergy together. Neuvillette and Furina apply so much hydro in single target and AoE, and their damage will both benefit from hydro resonance. You'll need a cryo unit with good off-field cryo application over time to consistently freeze your enemies like Charlotte or Rosaria. Even if Neuvillette can self-heal, you'll still generally want a healer so your other teammates can keep their health up. Having a VV Animo unit who can swirl hydro to boost Neuvillette and Furina's damage is highly recommended too. A C0 Neuvillette won't fully get his his A1 passive's max stacks due to Furina limiting your Hydro-related reactions in the team, but Furina makes up for that with her own buff and damage output. If your Neuvillette is C1, then that's not a problem anymore since he immediately gets 1 stack. Additionally, they will also help reduce each other's ER needs, allowing you to run more offensive stats on them. Wrasley follows the same principle, but he can provide all the cryo app you need to maintain freeze on enemies along with Furina, so your teammate options won't strictly need another good cryo applicator anymore. So for example, with Wrasley and Furina together, I can have a VV animal unit like Kazuha for the grouping and damage buff, or Jean who takes on the healer role already. If my Anemo isn't a healer, then I should have a healer like Charlotte or Mika, but if I'm using an Anemo healer, then I can go for a more offensive unit. But in general, as long as you follow the template and have a healer, you can have all sorts of combinations of 4-star and 5-star characters depending on what your account has so far. So to summarize my observations regarding Furina in freeze teams, I think that since her pets follow you around and prioritize the same target you're attacking, her Hydro application is pretty convenient to work with for a freeze team. There might be some cases where if she's the solo Hydro applicator, her AoE Hydro app is too small to catch all the enemies if they're not close enough, which lets them potentially get attacks in. But I can remedy that by strategically baiting enemies together or having an Anemo grouper pull them in together. And since the enemies don't get as much of a chance to attack you, I felt like I didn't have to worry about my HP that much as long as I had a strong enough party-wide healer. Freeze teams don't involve amplifying or additive reactions like Vaporize or Aggravate, so the DPS of the team is highly dependent on your character's raw damage output and crowd-controlling groups of enemies to deal AoE damage efficiently. As such, it's important to maximize your non-healer slots for capable damage dealers. Of course, freeze is only good if the enemies can actually get frozen, so it's not a team you bring against immune bosses. But when it works, it's a great, satisfying, and comfy team to play with. Here are some sample teams and rotations you can use as a reference. Adapt your team comp and rotations depending on who's available to you and your personal preference.
Come on out!
This moment will be frozen in time.
I'm out of here!
Dodge this!
Let my name echo in song! You can't run! Shiver! And away I go!
Cool it! Don't get frostbite!
Yeah!
Freeze!
Shower me with praise! Let my name echo... Obey! By ordinance divine! Ha! Barbados, guide us! Whirling snow! Sakura swirl! Unleash! Go as one! Yoo-hoo! Let the world come alive! Obey! Do your master's bidding! I swear by my sword! Whirling snow! Kamisato out! So let... Shower me with praise! Time to shine!
Providing cover fire! Let's keep... Into the wind!
As one with wind and cloud!
Let's begin.
Time to shine!
Let's keep going, team!
Some more, please.
For Rex Lapis! Time to shine! Time for takeoff! Breaking news! Say cheese! Strike a pose! All hail! Time to shine! Here we go! Think you can get away? Breaking news! Smile!
Moving on, we have an Electrocharge team, more commonly known as Taser. This focuses on Hydro and Electro units dealing a lot of raw damage while triggering Electrocharged reactions. Note that Furina doesn't buff Electrocharge damage since it is a transformative reaction. Electrocharge scales mainly on your unit's character level and EM stat, but the majority of the Taser team's damage source still comes from raw Electro and Hydro damage, which Furina does buff, so she works pretty well in this team anyway. So the core is Furina plus another Electro unit. You also typically slot in a VV Anemo ammo unit who will swirl both elements to buff their damage. Double swirling is easy to do in this team since Electro Charge maintains both a Hydro and Electro aura on enemies. And we have the usual suite of healers who more or less work the same way in Freeze. For Animo, there's Jean and Sayu, or Heizo and Sucrose with Prototype Amber, who can drive your team on field. For Hydro, there's Kokomi, Barbara, or Mona with Prototype Amber, who can also drive your team on field. Kokomi and Barbara will make particularly comfy drivers since they can heal the team while they're at it. For Electro, Cookie or Dory are your main options, but since they're healing a single target, you'll either have to carefully distribute it among party members or have another team-wide healer. For an easier experience, I'd personally recommend more to just have an Electro DPS occupy the slot or slots for Electro, but you can definitely make Cookie or Dory work if you really wanted to. For an unconventional option, you could also use Chi-Chi here as an on-field driver and team-wide healer, ideally with an ocean-hued clam build. With Electro, Chi-Chi can trigger Superconduct, which reduces the enemy's physical resistance, increasing the clam's bubble explosion since that's considered as physical damage. She can also freeze enemies every now and then with her skills, so that's also added crowd controlling utility. Anyway, once you're set on your healer, then you can just fill in your slots accordingly with the relevant elements and roles. There are a lot of good Electro and Hydro DPSs available, offering various levels of damage, ease of use, quick swap and on-field playstyles, and utilities aside from damage. Our off-field or quick swap friendly Electro units are Fischl, Beidou, Lisa, and Yae. These units will generally give you good rotational flexibility on the team, and you can choose a comfortable driver to go with them. Fischl and Yae are the easiest to slot in among these four because they don't have high ER requirements and can easily function as a solo Electro unit. Lisa and Beidou, though, have much higher ER requirements and are burst dependent to be functional, so it's very preferable to pair them with another Electro battery, Fischl being the most recommended, which also unlocks Electro Resonance for extra particle generation. Having Beidou does give added protection to your active character thanks to her damage reduction and interruption resistance buff, so it feels pretty comfy to have her in the team. Then there are the Electro DPSs that want their field time, like Keqing, Sino, and Raiden. Since they'll be on field for longer, they'll be more prone to taking damage, and Furina's continuous HP drain can make you feel squishier, so be careful. Raiden does feel smoother to play since she has infinite stagger resistance while in her burst mode. For Hydro DPSs, Yelan and Xingqiu are obviously great for off-field damage. If you hate getting staggered and want something comfy, Xingqiu can provide that with his Rain Sword's damage reduction and interruption resistance buffs similar to Beidou's, while Yelan's burst provides an increasing damage bonus for the active character. Meanwhile, Ayato, Child, and Nivelette have on-field playstyles. Ayato has both on-field and off-field presence with very easy gameplay while still dealing solid damage. Child can be very effective when he's fighting enemy mobs where his Riptide effect can deal a lot of cascading AoE damage, though be mindful of managing his skill cooldown. And Nivelette is just really cracked overall for his satisfying power washing gameplay for mowing down enemy mobs, though you'll just want to be careful with him getting staggered if you don't have his C1 or any interruption resistance effects. If you build a DPS Mona, then she can still be a viable on-field driver too, who also boosts your entire team's damage with her Omen buff. There is definitely a lot of room to mix and match these units. So for example, if you have a Hydro healer, then your Electro and or Animo slots can be more offensive. If you're using an Animo healer and a Hydro on-fielder, then choose an off-field Electro damage dealer for the last slot, and so on. Taser is also one of those Unga Bunga teams that don't need much skill in setting up its rotations or reactions, so it's very easy to build and play. With Furina, I did notice that if she's the only Hydro applicator on the enemy, you will generally trigger Electro Charge less frequently since her Hydro application isn't as fast compared to other teams with someone like Xingqiu. But since Taser is still more dependent on raw damage, then Furina's damage buff gets a lot of mileage. A Taser team for the 4.2 Abyss cycle is also pretty effective in the first half of floors 11 and 12. The enemies there have pyro shields, and using Hydro and Electro are the most effective counter elements to more quickly break those shields. Here are some sample teams and rotations you can use as a reference. Adapt your team comp and rotations depending on who's available to you and your personal preference.
Shower me with praise! Let the world come up! Midnight, fantastic!
Eyes on me!
I'll protect us.
Illusion shattered!
Strike a pose! Time to shine!
Here comes the catch. Barbados, guide us.
Inazuma shines eternal!
There is no escape!
Shower me with praise! Let my name echo!
Gotcha! Things are about to get dicey.
Go as one!
Wind, hear me! Torn to oblivion!
Right now, right here. Rest and rebuild! Shower me with praise! Time to shine!
The wind knows me.
A sight to behold. Right now, emerge. Torrent, bring refuge! Right here, emerge. Let the world come alive!
Wind strike!
Nothing lasts forever. Right now, emerge. Right there. Covenant of the deep!
Clouds high.
The birds come.
Emerge. Right now. Right here. By royal...
Silence!
Shower me with praise! Let my name...
Wind, hear me!
As you wish, main foot. Be sanctified.
Odds reveal thyself!
Settle down.
Yoo-hoo! Let the world come alive! Go as one!
I swear by my sword!
Shadow Raven! Let night...
The tides beckon.
That's the end of this Part 1 Furina Teams video. Furina's major impact on team building is making healers and their synergies a much bigger consideration than before, and thankfully for Freeze and Taser templates, we already have a wide selection of synergistic healers. We'll have to see how this changes in the next videos and team templates we'll tackle though, so watch out for those. But for now, let me know in the comments if you like to use any of the Furina team comps we discussed here or something similar. If this video helped you out, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!